Breaking news tonight. Blackout plunges Midtown Manhattan into darkness. A traffic nightmare with thousands stranded. Also, with Castro gone, will the president-elect annex Cuba? And Ivanka Trump's $3 million bubble bath.
Good evening, this is Jeannie Chung. We'll have more on those stories in a moment.
And I'm Richard Speziale. Our main story tonight, fake news. Did you get thrown by those headlines? Perhaps some people actually went to New York 1 to see if there really was a blackout tonight.
Yeah.
But there's a purpose behind that, and a purpose behind this show. Many years ago, I won't say how many years ago, I started the show with the mission to make everybody viewing look at the news and the information that's spoon-fed to them in a more critical manner. Now, years ago, when I started the show, the internet was pretty new. There was no such thing as YouTube, so if you put videos on the internet, you were probably a video professional like me. There was no social media. Cell phones were very primitive.
And Usenet.
And Usenet, right, yes. Everything was very primitive. So it's gotten more complicated as the years gone by. I always said question the source, question where the news came from, who it's attributed to. Nowadays, it could be attributed to a teenager in Macedonia creating clickbait for thousands of dollars a month. We don't know where the news comes from anymore. And many people also suspect the mainstream news, the ones that have traditionally been considered to be accurate and truthful, like the BBC, like the Washington Post, not like the New York Times. Now everything's being thrown into question. Everything, it seems, is being suspect as fake news, and mainly because, well, one of the reasons is political agenda. If they don't like the news, they can call it fake. For years and years, you're too young to remember this?
Yeah.
For years and years, there was something called the liberal bias. Conservatives talked about the liberal bias. You've heard that in news. And it actually came up after Barry Goldwater was defeated in 1964. Barry Goldwater was very conservative. He started the conservative movement, and he used to make offhand remarks like, oh, maybe they should nuke Central Park. He actually said that as a joke.
Central Park?
Yeah, because there was some demonstration that he didn't approve of. Barry Goldwater wasn't such a bad guy, but ever since then, the conservatives were talking about the liberal bias of the New York Times, the mainstream news. It's all those East Coast and West Coast liberals. But now it's much different, because now we don't know where the news is coming from. And it can be quite harmful.
And it's not as obvious as when you were a kid and you would pick up Weekly World News by the supermarket.
Right.
We all know Bigfoot's not real.
There's no Bat Boy.
Yeah, Loch Ness Monster isn't here, doesn't live in the Pacific Ocean.
We both remember the Weekly World News fondly.
Oh, but
it was entertainment.
Good. Yeah, it was entertainment.
It was entertainment. Same company that puts out the National Enquirer, by the way.
Okay.
I don't know why they ceased publication. They seem to be doing well, but whatever. They figured they'd get more readers from the Enquirer. So what's fake news got to do with us? What's the harm if somebody takes a story that isn't quite true and acts upon it? One such person is known as the pizza shooter. I don't know if we have this guy's photo, but his name is Edmund Welsh. And in response to some fake stories that were floating around the internet about a pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., where Hillary Clinton was supposedly running a pedophile ring and doing human trafficking and everything, this guy with the gun marches into this pizza parlor, a family restaurant. It's really a pizza parlor for kids. Starts shooting. Well, he shot one bullet. Fortunately, there were no kids were in the parlor at the time. But he said, well, I'm here to investigate this myself. One of the dangers of fake news. Now, this isn't so, that's one incident. You might be saying, well, that's one lone nut. There's always going to be a lone nut.
Do you think it's just to suppress the truth?
Oh, it's for a variety of reasons. The Macedonian teenagers are doing it to earn money. Yeah. They don't have a political agenda, it turns out. They just found out that the Trump supporters were more likely to click on their clickbait, so they tailored their stories more to the Trump supporters. And of course, got more outrageous stories, and a lot of them made their way into the mainstream. But it's not only a problem here; it's a problem worldwide. On December 20th, I believe, in Pakistan, there was a fake news article in a fake news site. I believe we have the graphic. It was about the defense minister of Israel, and I'm looking for the paper now. I don't have it in front of me, but it basically said that Israel was threatening Pakistan with nukes. Well, guess what? The Pakistani defense minister replied with an angry tweet, reminding everybody how that Pakistan had nukes as well as Israel. Now, there were a lot of typos in that thing that you just saw, misspellings. Maybe somebody in Pakistan wouldn't catch that, even if they're at the government level, if English is not their first language. But what the Pakistani defense minister should have known is that Israel does not publicize the fact that they have nukes. It's officially a secret. It's generally held true that they have 200 nuclear warheads, but they have never publicly admitted it and never actually threatened anybody. But here we go, saber rattling on an international level, saber rattling with nukes, people, all caused by fake news. And it's a rather disconcerting. Not only a number of people here can believe it. Well, as I was saying before, it's a lot harder than in the year 2000 to tell the fake news from the real news.
Yeah, in certain countries where you do watch the news, we all know it's propaganda. Like if you see a North Korean broadcast of news on YouTube, we all know that's all propaganda. It's all fake news because we come from a different perspective and we're not brainwashed. But now in the United States, you almost can't tell what's real, what's fake. I mean, you know how many stories have been spreading around Facebook in the past couple of years about Betty White dying? You know what I mean? And Betty White's like, I'm alive. You know what I mean? So it's really, really hard to discern what's real and what's fake.
2 points. If you get your news from Facebook, you're pretty damn lazy, and maybe you deserve to be lied to. Okay? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Facebook.
Nor am I.
Yeah. The thing to do is, well, as I've always said, who is the source? Where does this news come from? Most news stories are attributed to somebody said, an official said. Now, in the case of this thing from about this false news story from Israel, they were a little crafty. They took an actual quote that was made a couple of years before from an actual minister who has since retired. So they took an old quote, put it in a new frame, and the Pakistani minister believed it. So, one has to be careful. Who is saying this? Who is saying this? What news organization is it coming from? There's any number of fake stories that pop up that I might want to report on, or I work on other news programs, and I investigate. One of them that came up not too long ago was that Nancy Reagan was going to endorse Hillary Clinton. Turns out it was fake. It was not hard to tell because, number one, that should be a big story. There was only one instance on the internet, one place on the internet it was posted. It wasn't backed up by other stories. So if you see a story on one site and you Google the story and it's nowhere else, that's automatically suspect. Either it's brand new breaking news that nobody else has, which is really rare. The news organizations all read each other's.
Yeah, they all have the same bureaus or similar bureaus. The most ironic thing is when you just type in a name or news stories for a certain prominent person, your either if you all get the same thing, it could most likely be true, but you don't know anymore. It's
either a mad rumor, but you can narrow it down.
Exactly.
And if 5 different normally reputable news organizations verify the story, well, that means 5 different teams have given it a cursory run over. And I should give full disclosure here. I didn't mention, as I should have at the top of the program, we have both worked for major news outlets here in New York City, and there's nobody more cynical. There's no more cynical than people who work for news, about news. But it's spreading to the whole country, the whole populace. And as I say, if there's no credibility to the news, if nobody believes it, that opens up, well, let somebody play God. So let somebody declare that the news is genuine. Who gets to play God?
Exactly.
I don't want to give that responsibility to anybody.
But do you ever find, like, Google just aggregates everything?
Well, yeah, and that's the good thing about Google.
Yeah, but it's like they also have like sources that could be a well-designed web page and it looks real, but they'll just put it in the news section anyway, when in reality you start reading the content, I'm like, oh, it's a poorly written blog.
Yeah,
but they just made their way into the search somehow, just by key search terms or clickbait.
Clickbait, yes. And just because somebody doesn't know how to compose a sentence, well, doesn't automatically means it's suspect. But, if there's punctuation mistakes, there's spelling mistakes, normal news or operations, they'd have people who know how to check English, and they're using Microsoft Word or some equivalent that actually spell checks. But let's talk about this thing that happened on Tuesday. On Tuesday, in Bangkok, Facebook's algorithms were fooled into issuing a warning and safety check because somebody threw firecrackers. Now, this fooled a lot of people. Not only the Facebook algorithms, but the person who posted the story linked it to a BBC News report. Unfortunately, the BBC News report was from 2015. It was over a year old. However, most people looking at their phones, looking at their Facebook, said, oh, there's been a bombing in Bangkok. Do we have that graphics? Maybe, yes, we have that graphic.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's not the right graphic. That's the Israel graphics. It looks like a Facebook thing. But many people were fooled looking at their phones, see a BBC report, oh my God, there's been a bombing in Baghdad. Well, there was, but it was over a year ago.
And it was like a minor news story, probably.
And it was, not minor in Bangkok, but
in the rest of the world.
It was enough to warrant a posting on the BBC, and the BBC is very good about posting local stories too, because they have a worldwide reach, worldwide reputation, and they've had it for longer than anybody else. The BBC was active in international broadcasting back in the 30s,
exactly.
So they have many people worldwide following the news. But the story in Bangkok, again, Facebook set up algorithms to detect whether a news story is real or fake. Algorithms got fooled. A lot of people, including journalists, got fooled because they saw the BBC logo on a story that was attached to it.
Wow.
So that's one way of it happened with the story allegedly from Israel. It happened with this story that somebody taking an old news article, repackaging it, putting it out there.
A lot of stupid stuff does, spread around Facebook. I mean, I could put a photo of you and say, cut your head out or something and said, Rich Speziale turned into an alien.
Right.
And there could be a slight chance that it could spread all over Facebook and people would, believe that or something like that. You never know what becomes clickbait, and it could be that person bought Facebook ads on the side of it, and sometimes you can't tell on your profile whether or not those are ads or real stories.
Exactly.
Because the wall is just very ambiguous.
Yes, it is. And there's for a long time, for many years, there's been ads posing as news stories.
Yeah, exactly.
Infomercials late at night sometimes seem very newsy.
And a lot of it ends up, these companies pay like Outbrain. So if you click on the side at the bottom of the Washington Post, they'll just be like, the reason this person doesn't work in Hollywood anymore, or she lost 50 pounds.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And they're all done by agencies like Outbrain, and then it'll just click you to pay.outbrain.com, and then all of a sudden it's like, the pill, the magic pill that gives you the fountain of youth.
Right.
And it's just, that's also made to look like a real health thing.
Or 20 beautiful actresses who are now ugly.
Yeah, exactly.
And if by chance you click on it, it will show you one page and it'll say next. So they actually get, if you're willing to go down the line, they'll get 20 or more clicks out of that. But that's one thing. And again, Facebook and tweets, they come from individuals, so already they're suspect. I suspect tweets coming from our president-elect, even though that's his preferred method of communication.
When do you think Melania is going to prevent internet bullying in the household? Oh, wait a minute, she'll be in New York.
I think she's forgotten that part of the speech she read anyway, so.
Oh, did you know he's going to write his own speech now?
He's going to write his own speech?
He's going to write his own State of the Union address. I can't wait to see that shit show.
And I mean, he gets to do the State of the Union like days after he's sworn in, too.
No, I think he's doing his own inaugural speech. That's what I meant.
His inaugural speech, yeah. I was trying to figure out the other day. I can't remember who does the State of the Union, but I believe it's the new president. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I don't think Obama has one more to do anymore. I think he did his last one last year.
I think Obama should, just like stay there. Just be like, I'm doing one more term. Just occupy.
He said he could. He said he could have won, and well.
I heard that. That was crazy.
Yeah. I think he's right.
Yeah.
I think he's right. A good candidate. I think he's right. I mean, a good candidate should have blown Trump out of the water, but didn't. Now, speaking of Obama, after September 11th, I came on the air. I read from 1984. I warned about truth is lies and war is peace and all that. Some people are calling this the United States Ministry of Truth. On December 23rd, just the night before Christmas Eve, or the day before Christmas Eve, Obama quietly signed H.R. 5181. The Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act. It would task the Secretary of State with coordinating the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data, and, quote, develop and disseminate fact-based narratives to counter propaganda. Now, this is not so unusual. It's happened before, and hey, we are still in a state of war. We still have an ongoing war. So this always happens in the war. And as Obama signed it, and as it lays on this page here and lays in the news article, I'm not, that doesn't send me into panic about having a United States agency filtering information that goes international and saying that this is, countering, this is true, this is not. That doesn't bother me so much. It's more for international relations. But what would a Trump do with that? What will the Republicans do with that? It's very dangerous if everybody considers the news to be fake, because then everybody will be very willing to let a censor do the work. Have somebody play God, as I say.
Sheep.
And that's sheep, yeah. And that's very dangerous. And it's kind of scary to think that a lot of people will want that responsibility passed on. But it's up to you. You have to do the critical thinking.
And a lot of the times these days, a lot of news organizations are cutting costs. So the bureaus that you might have seen 20 or 30 years ago.
Of course, yeah.
You're not going to see them now. A lot of news organizations, I'm pretty sure even New York One probably had a bureau for every borough, and they probably don't have a bureau for every borough now.
Right.
So it's even that, and also the way children my age consume news, it's completely different. Like, we don't read newspapers, really. We read everything online.
Nobody reads newspapers anymore. I read newspapers online. I go to the Times and the Washington Post and other sources of information. But I mean, it's changed radically. There was a big fuss made over the fact that a lot of younger people were getting their news from Jon Stewart, not from the regular newscast, not from Lester Holt. Well, why the hell not? Jon Stewart is a lot more entertaining than Lester Holt and all these other guys. Also, Jon Stewart was angling it a little more honest.
Exactly.
He could be a little more slanted than Lester Holt can. Lester Holt is supposed to play it down the middle, be neutral. But ask me if I'm pessimistic or not.
Are you pessimistic
about all of this?
Yeah, about all of this.
Okay. Adjua. Well, first of all, we have two tapes. Let's roll the first one, the post-truth. This is from the Oxford English Dictionary and a young English gentleman who can explain it a lot better than I can. If we can roll that post-truth clip.
Post-truth. British politics was dominated this year by the Brexit referendum. In America, it was the presidential election. Both campaigns caused spikes in the usage of the phrase post-truth. That is, when objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief.
It sounds so harmless when it comes through that accent,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
this guy. Absolutely.
So.
Oh, you had asked me a second ago, why am I pessimistic about the future? Well, one thing is, it was hard. It was difficult to tell. Like I said, when I first started this program, cell phones were very primitive. There was no social media. YouTube wasn't invented yet. Relatively few. There were no blogs, or very, very few blogs. And it was a pretty clean media landscape. And I encourage people to critically analyze the news at all times, analyze the source, see where it's coming from, see if they have a point of view or if they're likely to have a point of view. Right now it's so much harder. You don't know, is this a real news story, or is this a nicely packaged thing from a teenager in Macedonia? You don't know. Here's another reason, if we have the other clip ready, here's another reason why I am so pessimistic. Roll it, please. Yes, the moonwalk. If you do a search on YouTube, which would not be an intelligence test, but there are 1,500,000 videos on YouTube to prove that this was a fake. We only have these fuzzy images, and of course, much like many other conspiracy theories, it was fueled by a 1970s science fiction film which depicted a faked landing on Mars. Now, we only have those fuzzy images that you've seen a million times to prove that man has been to the moon. That's not the only proof. There were 400,000 people working on the Apollo program alone.
Wow.
Not the Gemini or Mercury. 400,000 people working on Apollo alone. So if you accept that that's a conspiracy, you've accepted that 400,000 people have been shushed, have been gotten to. How do you get to 400,000 people?
And they got paid a lot of money to work at NASA.
Yeah, I mean,
because they're pretty brilliant if you're working at NASA.
The pay was good. I mean, one of the things about the space program, pretty much anybody who touched a computer was working for NASA in the 1960s. If you touched a computer in the 1960s, you were either working for a large corporation or a large research, an MIT type university.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody else had computers. Businesses did not have computers.
And they took up a whole room, I'm sure.
And they took up a whole room or a whole floor of a building. So the people who were computer scientists in the 1960s were few and far between. NASA got all of them. And then these are the people who became rich and became leaders of the industry in the 1970s. But to think that 400,000 people could be silenced about this vast conspiracy. And what about the Russians? If this was fake, the Russians would certainly have found out. They found out a lot of things about the space program. They would have loved to find out that this whole thing was a hoax, and then they wouldn't have to spend so much money
trying to beat
the United States.
Yeah.
But they did.
In their space program.
Yeah, the space program was a largely military operation.
Yeah.
But that's besides the point. If there are so many people out there, and one of these polls actually proved it.
Quinnipiac poll?
It wasn't a Quinnipiac poll. Let's see. Do I have the name of the? I don't have it in front of me. But one of the polls, said that 53% of Republicans believe the Pizzagate story.
Oh my God.
53%. A number of Democrats, a significant, like 19% of Democrats polled actually believed there was something to the Pizzagate story, despite the fact that there was nothing besides internet rumors.
Wow.
There was no evidence, nothing at all.
A
lot of people believe that the elections themselves, the voting machinery was hacked into, which was not the case. The Russians did hack into the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. They released a lot of stuff, but there's no evidence to prove that the election itself was hacked.
No.
Yet a lot of people will believe that, and a lot of people also believe that there were 3 million illegal immigrants somehow made it into the voting booth and cast a vote for Hillary.
3 million
that's what Trump said.
Hard.
That's what Trump tweeted, but Trump tweeted it. A lot of people
What
believe.
state? If you disperse that over 50 states, and especially in the ones that have large populations, it doesn't even make a significant impact.
It does not.
No, if you think about that really clearly.
Yeah.
Because,
Again, think about it clearly. Apply some critical thinking. Do not be spoon-fed. I'm very pessimistic also because of our president-elect, who speaks out of, the orange man speaks with forked tongue. He speaks out of both sides of his mouth.
Yeah, he
contradicts himself in the same damn sentence sometimes.
I know, and the worst part is he cares more about, shame on this guy
Right.
for hurting his feelings or something like that. In the past, other presidents, President Bill Clinton or Obama, they have never even acknowledged such human
They're above
beings,
such thing, but our new president is not. So I'm pessimistic, and I hate to end this year on a pessimistic note.
Me too.
But here we are. We're glad to see 2016 go. There's a lot of people we miss. We miss Joey Zero. We miss David Bowie. We miss Leonard Cohen. We miss Lemmy from Motorhead. We miss a lot of people. And, we'll miss you until next week. Everybody, have a Happy New Year, okay?
Bye.
For everybody here at DVTV, good night and Happy New Year.